wasn't punishing Sodom and Gomorrah. He was punishing one of the most devout cities in the world.
Well, it would certainly mean that God is not great.
It would mean that he could be very great, but he was very nasty.
Well, if a tsunami hit our building and demolished us, what would they say then about the punishment of God? They would say that it was...
This goes back a long way, you know. I mean, in the very early days of primitive Christianity, when there were earthquakes and sometimes pagan temples would fall down, because there were a lot of them in those days, the Christians would say, you see, we warned you this would happen.
Yeah.
You join up now before it's too late. The end is at hand. It's a very old tactic. It's amazing how it persists. The difference with the Lisbon earthquake, the fault, in other words, rather than the sin that created that, there's a big fault that goes from Lisbon over to the Azorian Islands, and it's going to act up again, you can be sure, was that Voltaire wrote a lot about it, Immanuel Kant wrote a lot about it. People began to wonder what the actual causes of earthquakes were. And it was the beginning of proper seismology. They began to work out that there were reasons why earthquakes happen in some parts of the world and not others. And this is centuries before we know about continental drift or the cooling planet. But the thing for your listeners to look up would be the Lisbon earthquake, because that's where this question became a quasi-modern one.
And I know you've also endorsed this disbelief or non-belief relief for Haiti at your Slate article, and we have a link at the FFRF website to that, so that non-believers as a group can give to assuredly secular charities to help Haiti.
Yes, because when I went on the radio with a couple of Christian hosts and pointed out what Robertson and other clerics had been saying, that upwards of 150,000 Haitians, already very miserable and poor, had been buried in the rubble, and the people were saying God had wanted this in some way, or it was their fault, they brought it on themselves. With an obscene tripe of this kind. Their riposte was to say, yes, but all the aid will be coming from Christians now, or religious groups. Now, let's leave aside the missionaries kidnapping Haitian children and the people who come there not really to bring medicine, but to bring propaganda and to proselytize, which is more than a waste of time or money. In point of fact, the main charities that have been effective there have been the Red Cross, which may sound religious but isn't. It's purely a symbol now, the Red Cross. It's a totally secular organization. And Doctors Without Borders, both of whom were already in the country with systematic networks of people ready to go. And that's where to send your money, not to any charity that is probably handing out Bibles.
Right, which they already have.
So I think it is probably worthwhile having a special charity for unbelievers, or if you don't want to do that, because an atheist could be indifferent. I mean, you don't have to be a moral paladin to be an atheist.
They were solar-powered Bibles.
You could be. It's one of the very few things I disagree with in Dan's book, actually. You can be an atheist and a fascist. You can be an atheist and a nihilist. You can be an atheist and a sadist. Atheism just says there's no supernatural dimension. But assuming you're none of those things, and you do want to help, then either there should be maybe a special site that we can go to, knowing our money won't be squandered by priests and nuns and demagogues.
Well,
or just give directly, as many people had before Richard Dawkins began this. Just give directly to charities that you know are reliable, efficient, non-corrupt, transparent, and secular.
I'm Annie Laura Gaylor with Dan Barker, and Free Thought Radio will be right back to finish our conversation with atheist, iconoclast, author, and journalist Christopher Hitchens.
Hi, my name is Rich, and I'm from Rochester, Minnesota, and I'm on Free Thought Radio.
The things that you're liable to read in the Bible, it ain't necessarily so. This is Free Thought Radio.
I'm Annie Laura Gaylor with Dan Barker. We're speaking with the inimitable, hard to say, Christopher Hitchens about why God is not great. God is not great is the title of his bestseller.
And Christopher, I just...
Available in paperback at Fine Books.
That's right. And from FFRF.org.
I just reread your 1995, I think, your book about Mother Teresa. It's called The Missionary Position, because as a result of our complaint over the postage stamp, we've been asked what's wrong with honoring Mother Teresa. And in your book, there's all this data. Tell us, what is wrong with honoring Mother Teresa?
Well, the first and most obvious thing to say is that we have a very fine constitution with a particularly well and clearly written First Amendment that essentially says you can't celebrate religious figures with public money. So that ought to take care of it, even if, that's to say, even if she was a good person and had done great things. But the idea that she was a good person and had done great things doesn't survive any examination of the evidence. My book is pretty short, and it contains 4 or 5 major factual allegations, none of which have ever been disputed by any reviewer in any Catholic or other Christian paper. And I'll quickly tell you what they are. One is, if you like, her world outlook. She was not at all a friend of the poor. She was rather a friend of poverty. She thought poverty was a gift from God, should be accepted, should be welcomed. And, of course, set her face against the only thing we know, the only policy or program that we know that does cure poverty, which is the empowerment of women. Poverty only stops in countries that have allowed women some control over their reproductive cycle. And Mother Teresa set her face like flint against that. Her whole life was devoted to stopping that happening. Women had to bear as many babies as their husbands wanted to inflict on them, so to say. Breeding machines. That's poverty defined. Second, she was a friend of the rich, and of the not very nice rich at that. I mean, since we've been talking about Haiti, I might mention that she went all the way from Calcutta to Haiti, which isn't easy to do unless you want to be greeted by the Duvalier family, agreed by all in the world to be perhaps the worst example of the rich oppressing the poor, to be given money by them, which didn't belong to them, which they'd stolen from the poor of Haiti, and in return to make a speech saying that she'd never seen such love in her life as the love of the people of Haiti for the Duvalier family. I mean, get over that if you can.
And photographs, too, the warm photographs
of her doing that.
Together with them.
She took a large sum of stolen money from Charles Keating, who some of your listeners will remember as the very gamey founder of the Lincoln Savings and Loan of California, a man whose whole life was consisting of transferring funds from the poor to the rich, and who gave her a large sum of money that didn't belong to him, the use of a private jet, in return for her testimony in his favor, eventually in court, when he was finally arrested for his depredations, where she said he was a great man. The court in California wrote to her saying, can we have the money back that he sent you? Because it doesn't belong to him, and it's not your right to be the recipient of stolen goods. She didn't reply. When she got the Nobel Prize for Peace, never having done anything for peace, or even claimed to, by the way, she went to pick up the award, the money, and you have to make a speech. You can't just take the check, and it has to be about peace. And she said she'd found what the main enemy of peace was in the world, and it was abortion and contraception. Now, I'm personally, myself, very squeamish about abortion. I disagree with quite a number of my secular friends about this, but it degrades the moral opposition to abortion to say that you think contraception is the moral equivalent of it. And that was Mother Teresa's belief, that they were two sides of the same coin. In other words, that contraception is murder too. So a ridiculous position to take at a ceremony in Stockholm, to say the main threat to world peace is people using birth control. I mean, hysterical, fanatical position. Then we ask, well, okay, that was a big chunk of money she got that day, as well as the money she got from Duvalier and Keating, and enormous numbers of donations from I think, decent people all around the world who believed she was helping the poor of Calcutta. Well, now, where did the money go? I've been to her clinic in Calcutta. It's a dump. It's basically not a clinic at all. It's a hospice. It's a very poor, wretched, ill-lit place where people dragged in off the street can die. With the money she got, she could have started at least a big teaching hospital in Calcutta. Nothing of the kind. Where did the money go? Well, actually, she was good enough to tell us. She built around the world more than 150 convents in her own name, named after her, hoping to have an order of nuns named after her. That's where the money went. Now, people who may be listening to this who perhaps sent some money to the Missionaries of Charity, did they send it so that convents could be built for fundamentalist Catholicism to be preached? I don't think so. So it really is, her whole career is a fantastic illustration of the way in which religion is a racket.
And we're running out of time, but people must get your book to read you on her culture of death, which I think is so eloquent. And we so much appreciate you joining us today, Christopher Hitchens. Look up his books. Look for that Vanity Fair. And this is Annie Laurie Gaylor with Dan Barker.